Well, my name's Debbie Lawley, and I'm the CEO of WillowDNA and co-founder of the company. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey into learning, and then reflect upon why that's significant in these days in terms of online learning, and especially about bringing online learning to the board agenda. As I say, my name's Debbie Lawley. My journey to online learning has been somewhat atypical. I am a technologist in my roots, so I've always been embedded with technology, and I have had a history where I've led very large technical teams. I then have moved into large business management, international, and then got very interested in the organisational learning piece. So taking on organisational learning, having got that background, means you're very fixed on what the business requires, and really not necessarily coming at it from a typical L&D perspective, and it gives you a different view on life. What this means is, right from the outset, my interest was always really about looking at learning from the business priorities, going from the business strategy, and I was very used to working with business strategy as the key element of what L&D was there to support. That helps inform learning strategy, develop learning activities, and really does inform the kind of L&D department that we need to be these days. I'm sure you all know this. It bears a little bit of repetition that there are three main shifts in thinking going on at the moment, from training to learning, from organisational as well as individual, and then thinking through how L&D is very different these days to the way it used to be. So no longer a provider of catalogue learning, but a very different approach to learning as the whole 70-20-10 environment opens up in front of us. So what I'm going to do this afternoon is talk a bit about how to talk to the board, how to actually talk strategy from an L&D point of view to the board, and then have a look at three particular case studies from WillowDNA's experience that will help you, I hope, in your conversations with your board as well. So there's a fundamental and changing shift with L&D's delivery these days. So the way in which learning is delivered to our populations is very, very different. So whether it's education via feedback, formal learning, coaching, mentoring, programs or planned experiences, it's all very different. But underlying all this is very much the technology enablement of learning in a way that it's never been before. Just to help me build the confidence and what have you. Can you actually still hear me now? Because I don't think I can hear you at all. No. So is that better? Hey, we're off again. Okay. How many people listened to Gerd Linnard's keynote speech this morning? Did you find it scary or exciting? Bit of a mixture, yeah. I really enjoyed it, and I love listening to futurologists speak. It's always exciting, and it kind of builds you up, doesn't it, to the brave new world. But the reality is for you guys, is that you've got to deliver on that now. So you're not really talking about a big futurology kind of imagination of the future, but what do you do as an L&D department right now? And there's a big difference from where it used to be. If you look at the slide set up here, then in the past, most of you will have been used to the yellow band there, so providing learning from a catalogue, probably some ad hoc e-learning involved there, very much learning on demand, so training as people require training, and training from a catalogue typically. Can you still hear me? Yeah? Then we saw the development of competency-based learning as well, so learning around performance, and some of you will be doing the catalogues and the competency-based stuff as well. And now we're beginning to see much more of a knowledge-based flow of learning. So maybe some of our new capabilities are going to be much more about taking learning nuggets for particular situations for L&D and actually understanding how to serve those up for your particular corporation. It doesn't mean to say you leave the left behind, but it does mean that in terms of actually moving forward and becoming a growth-based organisation, based on effectiveness, you need a very different approach to learning. For many of us, we find ourselves stuck in compliance land. And really, do you want to be stuck in compliance land? It keeps you in the game, it keeps your business functioning, but it isn't really actually the exciting stuff that's going to lead to the growth of your organisation. So if you're talking about, or wishing to talk to the board agenda about learning, then you need to use the language of the learning organisation. You need to use the language of the board. So something like a value chain analysis is a much more fruitful way of approaching learning interventions. So for this example, if you're focused on, say, how the organisation is going to improve their win ratio, and you look at the different factors in the grey boxes and one down from there, then it's about embedding the learning initiatives around a value chain approach to key business strategy. It's a very useful tool in order to be able to understand how learning interventions fit in terms of an overall learning strategy. Does that make sense to you? Yeah? So it's about using the right language, hooking into the key performance indicators of the business, and ensuring that your language, the way in which you're talking, and the way you're expressing yourself as a learning and development team is actually going to fit in with what the business board requires you to do in the longer term. So actually hooking into that language, building your own learning interventions to fit behind that is a much more fruitful way of doing it. If you're coming to the board talking about compliance and just compliance e-learning, then that's hardly going to keep you in the game in terms of the board agenda and keep you on their horizons. What does this look like in detail? Well, organisations love quadrants, don't they? And boards love quadrants more than anybody else. So if you're looking at the priorities of the business, then think through what the final outcomes are that you require to have. What's the intermediate outcome you need to have from a knowledge and learning point of view? And from there, build your learning interventions based upon the knowledge need of your organisation. That enables you to create the right sort of initiatives in order to be able to address very clearly what the organisation is trying to achieve. And then you can hook value and measurement on against it. So that's what it looks like in granularity. And it's all very fine and dandy, but what are you guys doing in L&D world, and what actual activities are happening? If you look at what's important, then the Towards Maturity study, published in December, put these down as the top 3 key training needs of organisations now. You won't see compliance in the top 3. The top 3 are leadership, management, business skills, and personal and interpersonal skills. Very different to what typically L&D departments are delivering in an online environment. It's not the same as compliance, is it? It's quite a different world, really, that actually managers are actually talking about in terms of the needs of the company and how to enable the company to make the step changes that the organisation needs. On that earlier diagram, you had efficiency over one side and effectiveness over the other, and that's the difference we're looking at here. It's just being on the table or actually being ahead of the game and actually ensuring that your organisation is achieving what it needs to achieve. But what does that look like in an online world? Well, this is a fairly typical curriculum for an online learning organisation which is already developed. But for you guys, well, I don't know if you're in this place already or whether this is somewhere you're going to, but actually having a vision of where you want to get to is incredibly useful. This is a very typical agenda of what an organisation would wish to seed. And the interesting thing about this is it isn't static. So at any point in time, any one of those items on there will be seeded with different content from the organisation. And indeed, as learning and development specialists, your jobs really are to keep the content there timely and relevant and refreshed as time goes on. Because of online learning, you now have the opportunity to ensure that subject matter expertise gets embedded within the curriculum and it's refreshed and changed on need, with the use of, yes, e-learning, but also with reading and also with video content, with podcasts, you can keep that fresh, innovative, and sexy. So, the world is your oyster, really. It's time to actually step up to that challenge and make a difference. For WillowDNA, we do this all the time. This is mainly what we do. We specialise in professional education in the online world and for executives. So what I'm going to show you now are 3 case studies where we've done just this, working with very different types of organisations. Now, last November, we're very proud to have earned the Distance Award, the gold for distance learning at the Learning Awards last November. We're very proud of that. It was a very hotly contested area in the awards ceremony, so we're very proud to have earned that one. And the way we earned it was primarily through one case study, which was from the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising. They had to create a full agenda for their membership, covering right the way from newbies coming into the profession, all the way through to experienced people who are account handlers, people at the top end of the tree. And this was basically their curriculum. It's a very different look to a typical organisation's curriculum, but it's very much their curriculum that they require to have. Now, over time, we've developed the entire curriculum with them. But the key here is it's their subject matter expertise that we've taken and embedded and created an full online learning experience for them. What does that look like? In practice, the online pathway system, which we provide for them, looks like this. And there's some important things to make note of here. So you have the content on the left-hand side there with a very rich, very deep, very insightful material. But you also have it served up, so you have an online tutor, you have presence so that people can see who's online at any time. There are discussions that people can participate in, and people can chat with each other as well at the same time. So it's a very personal, but very much an orchestrated learning experience, which people have enjoyed very much, and has, as I say, won us the gold last year. In terms of the content within that, then there are many, many learning items, and those items are continually refreshed and continually changed for what's timely or what's relevant for that organisation. So in this instance, we have quizzes, we have podcasts, we have videos, and when news breaks and things change, then the content can be refreshed and changed accordingly. And that's your way of keeping your learning agenda absolutely on top of what's going on for your organisation, whatever sort of organisation it is, whether you're public sector, private sector, not-for-profit, membership, whatever you're doing. For these guys, authentic voices mattered a lot. So actually having the voice of experts, but also the voice of novices, people learning and going through learning experiences is really important. Discussions have been phenomenally successful, so the whole social learning piece has been very, very popular and very much a place where people learn together. And by the by, there's no hiding behind the personality in the room. So one of the challenges for L&D is whereas as a training individual, you may well be used to projecting in front of a group of people like we are today. When you're online, you have to have quality material and it has to stand up to scrutiny. There is no hiding behind the personality at the front of the room. Lots of comments there from those learners. It went down very well indeed, and we've had a lot of success from the experience. People were saying it's the best study material they'd ever encountered. They love the forums. They love working and learning together, because the advantage of online learning, of course, is you can do that. So as you're going through the learning experience, it enables you to work and learn in snippets as you go along, working and learning as you need the learning. In other words, it's very much performance-led. Lessons learned from our experience with this is that do encourage dialogue early on in the learner experience. Get them used to actually having dialogue with other learners early on. Make sure you use e-learning for the right purpose and not for the wrong purpose. Use e-learning as a scene setter, not as a way of conveying all the learning, or else you're going to either spend an awful lot of money or turn off your learners very early on if you're not careful. Being trapped in e-learning is not a good feeling, so make sure you use e-learning very well indeed. Don't shy away from reading. People love reading. The whole Kindle thing says to me that that reading is actually taking on a much brighter future, really, in many respects. So don't feel you have to put all your learning into e-learning. It's just unnecessary. Reading is fine for some content, but think purposefully about the types of ways in which you can actually enable people to engage with the learning. And go for it. Don't shy away by putting the learning into some sort of embedded health and safety example. Put something exciting out there, especially if you're trying to engage your leaders. Then actually make it something relevant, something that's actually sexy for them, so it's going to matter to them, rather than hiding it away or just putting it in some kind of tick box training. There's some stats. One of the great things about online learning is its reach. It means that you can increase the numbers of people being able to be touched by learning. It means you can increase the diversity of the learning. It means you can increase the granularity of the learning. It means you can create a much, much wider, broader, deeper, insightful experience if you use and design learning well. So the technology that made that happen was Pathway, our hosted LMS, so I won't go into that in too much detail. If you want to learn more about that, we're just here. But for the IPA, what that's meant is that online learning experience and actually getting used to it has meant that they're now able to reach out to other countries. So rather than being in a UK membership organisation, now they are going out to all the continents of the world and are in over 40 countries around the world. So, you know, their reach is extended because not only have they appealed to the agenda of the people in this country, they've actually appealed to a worldwide agenda. And now for something completely different. Oracle, again, another one of our customers in our past portfolio. Oracle's a very different organisation, hugely complex product set, very difficult relationship management environment because you've got a very much acquisition-based growth strategy for that organisation. So a lot of their difficulties was multiple products, multiple different communities of people having to get used to that degree of complexity. Very, very difficult. So what we did for them was to help them understand the underlying mega competency, which was about virtual teaming. How do you work in all these different types of teams when nothing is static, it's all changing, it's all different. So what we created with them was a partnering curriculum for them, lots and lots of different content, very much a strategic agenda for the future. One aspect of which was focused very much on virtual teaming. So if you go into granularity, which is all we've got time for this afternoon on one of those topics, if you look at virtual teaming, what we did for them was we created a framework for virtual team learning and working. So we understood the elements involved in virtual working, what that's built up of, and the importance of things like trust in all this. And we created a guide to virtual working, which was available on the online environment with all the learning tucked around it. That guide has lots of contents in it, all of which is served up through different methods and different ways of orchestrating the learning. And their learning pathways has enabled their partnering ability to better improve dramatically, and their reach through all that complexity of different relationships is much more fluid, much more easily understood, and much more tangible to wider groups of people. And right now, one of the pieces of work that we're currently engaged on is a Telecoms Academy design. I can't say who it is at the moment because we're really right in the middle of launching it out and their own people don't know about this yet, so it's a bit early days. But this particular academy is focused on the broadest leadership in the broadest sense. You can see all the different types of topics that strategically they are approaching there, all online. It's a heavy online agenda, absolutely moving leadership training into the online learning world, away from the very typical method of training leaders from the past. The area that we're working on at the moment is perhaps one of the most challenging areas for online learning, which is coaching. Taking our managers and creating a coaching environment, a coaching culture for our managers. This is the key piece of work that we're working with them on the moment. And that is very much something which is best delivered over time as time moves on. So therefore, our time to mastery with the different learning experiences coupled with workshops as you go along, is the way in which we're tackling this, and we're currently creating lots of rich online experiences to help people do this successfully. I'm going to finish with this particular slide. I'm sorry it's very, very detailed. I've got handouts on some of the seats there, so if you want to look at it and kind of take it on board in a bit more detail. It's founded on a piece of work by a good friend of mine, Charles Jennings, who originally did one of these pieces comparing traditional training with training as it's moving. What you can see here is that we've developed it further, so comparing the left-hand side with the right-hand side, then training departments moving away from catalogue learning, focus on curricula, focus on standalone e-learning modules, very much focused on course attendance at a point in time, and really moving towards, focusing on online elements as being something kind of optional. They use the word blended, and really focusing on broad competency models and moving much more to the creation of a working on learning scape or an ecosystem where managers are a part of that learning, where there's a method of encapsulating learning from doing with learning with experts, a method of working and learning very closely aligned and making sure that learning from mistakes is all part and parcel of that learning. So that's what online learning enables you to do. Learning is a leadership issue. It's a leadership agenda issue too. And you can now, with online learning, really make that leap from being something which is classroom, something where L&D is seen as compliance, to much more of a learning-focused, business-led organisational approach. And you can do it now. It's a question of aligning with the right kinds of organisations around you to enable you to do that. We are on stand 32, which is just here. We'd love to talk to you. If you haven't got one of the handouts, we've got some more on the stand. And if you'd like to see how we treat online learning and like to have some more insight into some of those online learning agendas, then do please come and see us, because we'd love to see you. Thank you very much.